Hello, Father Ted. We are live right now. Thank you for joining us for yet a third episode here. We changed the name of our podcast, our videos from what was it called? Father Ted with Dr. Tim. Pretty boring, but you knew exactly what it was. But now instead, it's a doctor and a priest walk into a podcast. I love that name. I think it's going to stick. But this is Tim Peck. I'm the host and co-founder here at Project Next Media. Project Next Media is meant to free you from the fear and hate of our traditional mainstream medias and try to bring together people of all different persuasions, all different ways of thinking, and find common ground and make your life better. So, Father Ted, would you introduce yourself quickly, and then tell me how are you doing today?
Well, Tim, I'm doing well. Actually, very well. I've been rather busy. I'm getting old, and have to figure out what I can do and what I can't do. The main thing happening to me is I'm realizing I have to go slow and appreciate, and it's really wonderful, kind of coming to that realization. I had to cook a dinner yesterday for the brothers, and I just took time and I said, what do they really like to eat? And we had a visitor, so I cooked this sausage crock-pot dish, and they really liked it, and I was very content.
That's nice. I don't think, you've cooked for me before when we visited you there in Dayton at the University of Dayton, where you're stationed right now. So yeah, you've gotten good in your old age, Uncle Ted.
It feels so good when you do something like that, and then when they ate it, the meal was just wonderful. But the conversation, it all sort of worked together.
It's all one. It's all one. And so yeah, today we're going to talk about a little bit about the readings and your homily this week, as well as I think you mentioned Thomas Merton a bit, and I've been growing interested in him, and the reason for that is multiple, but one, he's right here. He's now passed away, but he was right here in Kentuckiana. He was in Bardstown, was in a monastery there, and then in Louisville, spent a lot of time there too, and came to some realizations. And there's a plaque right down on 4th Street and Muhammad Ali Boulevard down in Louisville, so only moments away from where I live here in southern Indiana. So I'm going to go visit that, maybe bring the podcast over there and have an episode over there. But we'll talk about Thomas Merton, about what he would think about what's going on today. But how was your homily this weekend? Where did you do it? What was it about?
So I gave the homily at a St. Helens church here in Dayton, Ohio. And what it was about is what is a mystic? And so I've been reading about that, and there's one great author I read. His name is Richard Rohr, and he was writing about mystics. I was reading that. So a mystic is someone who sees sort of in the depth of what's going on, understands the depth of what's going on. So I tried to help the people to see that we were all mystics. I said, even the children, even the teenagers have parts of them which are rather profound, And then I want to tell you about a man here at the university who cleans the rec center where I go to exercise, and he's been doing it for like 30 years. And he's an African American, but he suffers a lot from the things that are being said or happening in society for the poor or the like an African American. He really suffers from it, but and he's very insightful, and he is not prejudiced, but he's very sort of understanding, but also angry too. So he's a mystic. So I said to myself, he ought to be teaching the students here. They should. He's got a PhD in something that other people don't have. He's kind of a mystic. So
I love that. I mean, the word suffering is such a powerful visual word that he suffers for people. Not that he,
Mhm.
sometimes in modern we say feels the world deeply and, is very connected. As man is that literally feeling suffering for the people around him. This idea of college students going to talk to him to learn a thing or two, fits right into this idea of what is user-centered design, human-centered design, where if you're trying to build a better world, you're trying to build a better product, you're trying to build a better company, a better nation, go to the people who are actually using that thing, understand from them and build backwards from there, rather than kind of being on high and saying this is the way it should happen and pushing down. It sounds like you do a lot of that, talking to people, kind of quote unquote on the ground.
So as you're talking, I think of what's going on with the present administration, with the immigrants and with the people losing their jobs. There's a lot we could talk about that, what's going on there. But
yeah. And again, let's talk about what Thomas Merton might think of that. So let's talk about Thomas Merton. Can you tell us about who he was,
sure.
what even a monk is, and
Mhm.
what his message was, and
Mhm.
why people thought of him as a mystic?
So Thomas was a person who was born not in the country and came from Europe, and in the he was born in the 20s, and the 1930s he came and studied at Columbia University. He became a Catholic. He went to St. Bonaventure University up in a while. He was associated with the Franciscans. And I read his book called Seven Story Mountain when I was in high school years ago. My religion teacher asked me to read it. And that book is extraordinary because it explains his progress. And what he had was this gift of wanting to bring God to society. It was just deep in him. So he was going to join the Franciscan Catholic religious order, but then he wanted to go to a stricter order. So he joined the Trappists in Kentucky there. And he loved solitude. He found that God was in quiet, but he's very intelligent, but he was a good writer. So when he got to the monastery, the abbot wanted him to write, and he said, "Well, why should I be a writer? I want to just be a monk." He was doing all these things in the monastery, like helping on the farm and learning to pray, and spent a lot of time in quiet prayer. But he wanted to go to a more serious monastery, which is in Europe. But the abbot kept saying to him, "No, you stay here because you have a gift, and you have to use this gift." So he finally realized that. Then he started to write books, like he wrote this book, Seven Story Mountain, and it became extremely popular in the 1940s. Just many, and his was known as a writer. So then I'm reading one of his books called the Sign of Jonah, and that's really his journal that he wrote from the time he was in the monastery for about 7 or 8 years. It's a very interesting book describing everything that he goes through.
Got it. And let me say, you can also listen to lectures that he gave to people, I believe at Bellarmine University, maybe it was UK, maybe it was Louisville. There's like a series of them online, and there's a podcast where you can listen to all his lectures. The guy is really interactive with the people that he was speaking with, and just a very powerful speaker.
Yeah. So as we're talking, I do think that all of us are called to sort of see what is this part of us that sees on a deeper level and recognizes on a deeper level, and to talk about. So the homily that I gave on Sunday was about this, because it was a story, first of all, of Jeremiah, the prophet. And Jeremiah, as I mentioned last week in our conversation, a prophet is someone who has to tell the people what God is saying. And at the time that he was a prophet, the Israel people were not cooperating, and they were losing their kingdom. And in that year, it was about 743 BCE, I think it was. They kept resisting this, and he told them they were going to lose their kingdom, and they did, and they had to go into exile. And it was only about 70 years later that they were able to start. The Assyrian Nebuchadnezzar gave them the right to go back to their own city of Jerusalem. But one of the things that Jeremiah said in the reading that was we had this week.
Brother Ted, let me just say, the paper that you have is on top of your computer, which is picking up in the microphone. So, and just put it off to the side, looking at your notes, we'll be able to hear you better.
Okay.
But we heard everything you said.
All right. So the first reading in the Mass this weekend was, but Jeremiah was telling them that they had to leave the country. They thought he was a madman, and what they were telling him, but they wouldn't listen to him. And our reading it in the church said, "Cursed be is the one who trusts in human beings, who seeks strength in flesh, whose heart turns from the Lord. He is like a barren bush in the desert that enjoys no change of season, but stands in lava waste, a salt and empty earth. But blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord. He is like a tree planted beside waters that stretches out its roots, fears no heat, and leaves the leaves grow and stay green in drought. It shows no distress and still bears fruit." So that's what a prophet is, and that's who Merton was. He was a kind of a person who constantly tried to figure out what was God saying, and he wrote about 70 books while he was in the monastery. Toward the end of his life, he wrote a lot about atomic warfare, about war, about prejudice. One of the things that I read recently was talking about war is mainly caused by people, they're fearful, and someone starts a war because they don't know who they are. They have to, some country has to be afraid of others rather than trust in God or trust in yourself to work out solutions. It's like a domination caused by fear. Mm-hmm. And when you're a mystic, in a sense, you recognize that you can trust yourself and trust your abilities, and you don't have to, deny that sort of a thing. It's because it's much more involved as you get into all the problems that we have. How do you solve these problems?
It reminds me. So I read a bit of Merton before this, and I was just kind of jumping around to various essays or passages just to hear a little bit more of what he said. And I'm not going to do a direct quote because I won't get it. But he did speak about this idea that when God thinks about, when humans think about their work and what's serious and what is important to them, often God might see that as playful, as not that serious, as really not the things that are too important to be focusing on. Whereas when humans see things as playful, God might see that as more a joyous, and that's actually the work that we should do. Being together, celebrating, being people who relate to one another, trying to find one another's commonalities and differences, and still coming together. So this idea of coming together is the work that God wants us to do. I thought that was pretty beautiful, as well as apropos for today's world, and a bit of what's going on with immigration in the United States, and some of what's happening with our administration touring Europe right now. And I know that there is kind of tension right now between Catholic bishops and of the U.S., especially of the Pope, and some of what's happening with the current administration, especially the things being said in Europe. Do you want to, bring us through that in as factual way as you can? It's a charged thing, so let's try to be give people what the facts are, and then we can talk about opinions.
So, just to put that in, I just recently spoke to one of the students here at the university, and he's a young man, a first-year student, and he found a girlfriend, and he's very excited about this. And I find that the students, if they are aware of the good things happening to them, and they sort of overcome the negativity, and if they develop habits that are overcome the negative things like dominating and fear and control and lust, and then they're free, and then a newness happens to them, like they can find someone they like, and then they go in friendship and they keep growing. So it's the same thing with what's happening in, I think, the present administration. I think I can say, if they try to control everything, bring more efficiency to the federal government by dominating and controlling and not listening and not really solving the problems, it creates, rather than a collaborative effort, rather than an effort where everyone is appreciated, which we're really called to do, So, so the church today, the question you brought up is very concerned with immigrants, and also with anybody that's suffering, because the fundamental principle, even of democracy, is that every individual has rights and a dignity. And there's one of the things that Vice President Vance is doing is he is in sort of a conflict now with the Pope, because what he's saying is that there's something from St. Augustine that he was quoting, and he was saying that St. Augustine said that you should first of all take care of your family and the people close to you, and the people furthest away, you should really only do that with kind of if need be. Well, it's so contrary, that kind of first of all, Augustine didn't say that, nor did St. Thomas Aquinas. The fact is, every individual has a dignity, and you treat every individual with that dignity. And for example, to call immigrants criminals is basically very unjust and unhelpful. And if you create that atmosphere in society that, well, we're superior, we're primarily going to take care of ourselves, and the other people down in the bottom have to take care of themselves, I don't care for them very much. It's contrary to the way God is, because God loves everybody and cares for everybody.
If I can interject with Thomas Merton again, there's this plaque downtown in Louisville on 4th and Muhammad Ali, I believe. I'd said that before, and I looked at what that plaque was. So Thomas Merton had a revelation when he was there, that he was looking around at all these different people walking around, and he said to himself, I was suddenly overwhelmed with the realization that I loved all these people. And he found them walking around shining like the sun.
Now look at see how significant that is, that realization,
Yeah.
because you recognize, well, what is God like? God loves everybody, absolutely everyone. And if there's not like the poorest of the poor, and you don't recognize that they also are loved by God.
And so there's this idea of, there's an idea of kind of just man has laws, right? They're not God's laws. We need them to exist as a society. But how we implement those laws, how we operationalize them, if we do want to carry some of the message of the mystics, some of the message of the current Catholic Church, thinking about how to do it in a respectful way, do it in such a way that you're thinking about the suffering of people, to suffer, like you said, of this man who cleans the gym at the at University of Dayton. This man literally empathizing so much that he himself is suffering for other people who are suffering. That type of empathy it feels a little lost in politics. And I don't mean that to say that our current administration and Trump is that. I mean that has been lost in politics for a long time. And that's just, this is just a continuation of that, and maybe a deepening. And so, this idea of this Thomas Merton idea of being overwhelmed with the realization that I loved all these people was just popped out at me. So I'd love to go next time you're in Louisville. Let's go see this plaque.
So just as you're talking about all that, let me just say what I'm thinking. So in the Gospel of Sunday was St. Luke's Gospel, and Luke is saying, blessed are you if you're hungry, blessed are you if you're thirsty, blessed are you if you are suffering, people are persecuting you. Yours is the kingdom of heaven. And then if he says the contrary, blessed of you are laughing and proud and satisfied, you're going to have the opposite. Now, what Luke is trying to do there is saying to the first Christians, when he writes it about the year 80, he said, you are people who thirst for what is right. You thirst for what is correct. And if you're doing that, you're going to find this goodness of God, really the goodness of Christ. You're going to find this magnificence of life. So it's not dominating, it's not controlling, but it's searching. It's like this mystical experience of being aware of all the good that, we're going to have. That's sort of the way we have to face these terrible problems we have, with that kind of a thirst for what is right,
So, getting down to practicalities for us as individuals, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what I'm hearing, and so correct me or adjust, is it's reminding me of social media a bit. So let me go there, which is the suffering of other people, this idea of empathy, this idea of suffering when maybe perhaps yourself while this is happening, is something that can be directed into empathy and to action in ways. One thing there is about awareness and being in touch with what is actually happening in the world. You think about social media, a lot of people have turned off their social media right now because it's just too much for them. And that is for many, our main way of connecting to others. Without that that brings, now instead of turning into yourself as much, perhaps that brings a space of which you can turn into community, into others, into issues, into helping others, into being part of communities, whether that means going to a ball game or going to church on Sundays. This idea of relating can bring value for you as a person, and as all of us as a community as well. So, what are your thoughts on that as a summary of the practical actions of what we can do with this week's gospel?
Personally, we had a meeting here the other day with students. We talked about loneliness, and people are very often lonely. They don't have friendships, and they're doing things by themselves so often. Like even the cell phones that we have, they sort of dominate, can dominate our lives. But I think that we have to strive against that fear of relating, because if we don't act, if we don't start to communicate with each other in all kinds of ways, we're not going to grow. And there's too much of that separation. Republicans and Democrats aren't talking to each other, and it's happening in all kinds of ways. People aren't going to church as much, or they're not forming local groups enough. So to overcome this, it demands that we deliberately come together to find actions that are helpful to society in all kinds of ways.
Sounds like it could be a Thomas Merton book, Strive Against the Fear in Relating. That was your quote right there. So I'll take that one down. Amazing. If anything comes of this kind of tumultuous time that we're in, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, if what comes of that is a loss of the fear of relating and connection into our community more, that would be a beautiful silver lining. Thank you, Father Ted, for your time. As always, this show is reaching thousands of people at this point that aren't typical viewers of the things we're doing at Project Next. So I love that. I love that we're reaching a whole new audience of people, talking about religion openly, talking about tensions between religion and politics and current administration, talking about the place where there is agreement, and more so talking about how we can bring that into our own individual lives and what we can do ourselves tomorrow to make our lives better. So that's exactly what we're trying to do here at Project Next. So thank you.
All right. I love this kind of dialogue. It's just so beneficial. Thanks a lot again.
Well, thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.